Today we're diving into a classic personal finance showdown. Roth versus pre-tax investing. Is it better to pay your taxes now and enjoy tax-free growth later, or defer taxes and keep more cash in your pocket today? We're breaking down the math, strategy, and trade-offs to help you decide which approach fits your financial future. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Mannon, and this week we've got Nora, Bob, Adam, Sean, and Tyler on our panel. Tyler, want to go ahead and get us kicked off?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Thanks, Ryan. I think a big thing, and I deal with a lot of young professionals, is pack it away in Roth. Early in your career, that gives you that 30, 40, 50, 60 years of growth tax free. So whether it's opening up your own Roth, whether it's your employer offers a Roth option in the 401k, focus on that early in your career. And as your income grows, you may have to do some different strategies that others may talk about. But that first, 3, 4, 5 years, pack it away in Roth.
Yeah, and then as your income grows, you start to kind of get into this. Now I'm in my 40s, right? I'm starting to be a young professional. I'm starting to make good money. And now you kind of get to the point, does it make sense for me to go traditional? So especially you start getting to the 40s, 50s range, your income's higher. That may be the time to kind of go from Roth to traditional. And sticking with Roth is never a bad option. Tax-free growth is extremely powerful. But you start to get to age 55, you're making as a family over $400,000. It's going to be tough to make up the tax savings that you're putting in the Roth and just paying taxes now over the next 7 years when you could withdraw the money. So that may be the time to start thinking, all right, I've been doing Roth, the most powerful investment vehicle we have with our tax laws. I may start to go traditional. If I start getting in my mid 50s, my income starts getting really high, a good time to sit down with a financial advisor and be like, does it make sense for me to go traditional at this point?
Yeah, and Sean, I think I see a lot of that, right? Working with a lot of retirees, the standing instruction has always been just stuff it into pre-tax, right? And then we get these folks that have, whether it's, $500,000 or $5 million, and it's all pre-tax, they kind of lost the flexibility for where they take money from. So something I like to talk about is what I call tax diversification, right? It's about, okay, do we have some Roth dollars? Do we have some pre-tax dollars? And trying to balance those out over time. And while you're hitting that kind of late stage of your career, it may make sense to keep pumping into the pre-tax while you're earning as much kind of as were your top earnings years. Because then as soon as you retire and your income drops, then we could talk about doing Roth conversions, right? Because ideally we want to get that money into Roths because of everything that's already been said. But it may make sense to just wait until after you retire and do some really good planning for Roth conversions versus trying to do it while you're still working and missing out on some of that tax benefit there.
Bob, I'd say another good reason for that conversion is traditional is always going to get taxed. Uncle Sam's always going to get their fair share. So if you're leaving $1 million and you pass away and you want to leave that $1 million to your kids, well, that's got to be spent in the next 10 years, right? And so you're really only leaving them 600,000 because that thing's going to get taxed at 40% and quickly. That conversion and planning in the later stages of life in retirement is extremely important.
And to support that, Adam, it's with the Secure Act that was recently passed and the elimination of the stretch IRA, that when we work with a lot of people in retirement, or even, it's hard to think when you're planning, when you're really young, what you want to leave behind. But when we kind of talk about that generational, there's a lot of strategy in terms of, if you were to pass, your Roth IRA goes to your beneficiaries and it continues to grow, tax-free. They don't pay taxes when they take out of it. And that's a good point, Bob, when you want to do some of those, conversions, those Roth conversions, if you have a large IRA balance. Now, if you are in retirement and you're in the later stages of life and you have a huge IRA balance, to Adam's point, is if you were to pass in, let's say your spouse was still alive, that IRA now becomes their IRA, right? But they're still going to be, Uncle Sam's still going to want that money. So you're going to still owe those, taxes when you make those distributions or required minimum distributions. But if you pass that to a non-spouse, to Adam's point, is you have 10 years to take those distributions out. Now, there's strategy behind that in terms of what your income is, and you take a lump sum or what the value is and take that over a 10-year span. But just know there's a lot more tax consequences with an IRA, especially after you pass, not just in your lifetime when you take distributions, rather than a Roth. aside from the huge benefits personally for tax-free growth, you can leave that to your beneficiaries as well.
And I think, Nora, you brought up a good point, and Bob too, about tax diversification. We see people that have not done that and they get to age 73. They don't need the money that's in their IRA, and it may be a couple $1,000,000, but at age 73, the government says it's time to pay us. And so they are going to make you take money out of your traditional IRA. Whereas if you've done some of Bob's strategies and moved over to Roth, there are no required minimum distributions at age 73 in a Roth. That's only traditional side of it. So another advantage of the Roth, another reason to sit down with an advisor, come up with a good strategy, talk about what your plans are for passing on to your heirs, talk about your distribution strategy is in retirement to make sure you're taking advantage of all the unique tax laws.
Yeah, and I think again, the idea of, hey, everything has to be Roth, it doesn't quite need to be there, but you want to manage your marginal tax rate or understand your marginal tax rate to decide, hey, should I be pre-tax, should I be Roth, and maintain some balance between those different accounts, right? Because if we just go ahead and convert everything at once, right? Sometimes it can make sense. I've seen it make sense, but it can be a really big tax bill. So doing it little by little, because once you hit those RMD stages, you need to satisfy your required minimum distribution before you can do any conversions. So once you hit 73, your flexibility gets lost a lot. So as much planning as you can do prior to that is going to give you the most flexibility to decide, how much you have in pre-tax Roth and after tax as well.
And also to Tyler's point, you've got the employer, they're always going to put their contribution into the pre-tax side. And the reason they do that is because they're getting a tax deduction. Right. That's kind of the hidden secret behind 4Ks, especially for small businesses. It's like maybe it is for the employees, but really it's for the business owner. Right. So they're trying to get the tax deduction. So you're always going to have a natural tax diversification if they're putting theirs in pre-tax and you put theirs in Roth. So kind of another reason to kind of put your 4K contribution in that Roth 401k.
Is there a rule of thumb you guys use for what that balance is? Like, is it 50-50? Is it 50-30? If a brokerage account's involved too, does that change it at all? Maybe just like some high level guidelines for a consumer?
Yeah, I think for a lot of my clients, they're talking about flexible retirement a lot. They don't want to grind away in their corporate job, even though they have a high income. They want to say, hey, I want to save as much as possible, plan as good as possible, and call it a day at 50. How do I do that? Well, if you have everything in pre-tax, that's going to make it pretty hard. So having, a Roth account, even non-qualified brokerage accounts, that's going to give you that flexibility. So another point that's not just monetary, it's also planning based. I want to be done early. How can I retire, semi-retire before, 60?
And I would say for a rule of thumb, it's really difficult to pin it down, but just making it even, right? So if we're, just talking between our qualified accounts, right, IRA and Roth, 50-50 is a good place to try to be because then at least you have flexibility. So again, if I'm working with a retiree and they are 65 and they need $50,000 for a home upgrade or a car or whatever it might be, if they have money both in IRA and Roth IRA, we can make a decision based on where they are in their tax brackets for, hey, do we want to pull from the tax-free side or do we want to go ahead and pay Uncle Sam and pull it from the IRA? Having that flexibility is super beneficial. So it's hard to give an exact number, but there is whatever the balance is and whatever makes sense, that's where we want to get to.
And Tyler, one of the things to piggyback off your point is how important it is for a young professional to start saving in that Roth right away. Because if I'm consistently saving in that Roth and 10 years down the road, I get in a bind and I need to access that. Well, everything you've put into that Roth up to that point, you can take out tax free, right? So your cost basis, if you need it, is available in the Roth. You want to start saving as early as you can. So when life does happen and you do need access to it, you have that ability to do it tax free on the Roth side.
Cool. I think one overarching theme of what all you guys are saying is the most important thing is just to do tax planning for your entire life, not for one little silo. So keep thinking about it as things evolve. Since Nora, that was kind of her point, we're going to go ahead and give it to Nora this week as the winner of the episode. So Nora, whatever you want to rant about, it's all you.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'll try to stay on topic here, but I just am just a huge proponent of a Roth. But again, it makes sense to meet with somebody to talk about your certain specific financial situation. When you think about Roths or any type of contributions, not only do you want to think about yourself, you want to think about what happens when you pass. But for me, and I know anyone that's listening that has young kids, you also think about them during your lifetime, right? And can I start a Roth IRA for them at a young age? So we do a lot of different planning for families, not just for you individually, but your children, what happens when you pass, and the beneficiaries that you want. So it's really important to meet with someone, talk about what your goals are, what's important to you in your life, future children, what can we start for them? And again, a huge proponent of a Roth, but really makes sense if it makes sense for you, and we can help strategize with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nora. So overarching theme of this week's episode is Roths are important. Ask someone about them or do some research, and hopefully you can get one started and start saving in some different investment vehicles. So thanks for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, everyone.